Hello, everybody. So nice to see you all. If you're able to turn on your camera, it would be great to see faces. If you can't, we understand. It's wonderful to have you here. My name is Andrew Engel, and I'm Senior Program at Reimagine. Welcome to the third and final session of our series, Addiction, Harmful Habits, and Healing. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a white cisgender male with glasses, salt and pepper short hair. I'm wearing a gray sweater. Last time I saw our guest, I was wearing a much more colorful sweater. Today I'm in gray. It's very cold here in New York City, Lenapehoking. My colleague Misha Jain is here with us tonight, helping out. Hello, Misha. Thank you. Reimagine is a nonprofit organization catalyzing a uniquely powerful community, people of different backgrounds, ages, races, and faiths, people of no faith, all coming together to heal ourselves, our communities, and our world. We support each other in facing adversity, loss, and mortality to transform life's biggest challenges into meaningful action and growth. Reimagine resources, support groups, events like this one today are all free and accessible to the public. This is made possible by the support and generosity of participants like you. So for those of you who already made a tax-deductible donation when you registered for this program, thank you. And as with every series, we explore a topic in 3 parts. We move through an arc of learning. First, a panel discussion. Second, a workshop in which we do something more experiential. And finally, in this session, we are taking action. It's an opportunity for you to consider a small step towards change. At our first session, I want to give you a bit of context about the series for those who didn't attend the first session. We heard powerful testimony from 4 authors from very different fields: neuroscience, psychiatry, poetry, and memoir, who all face addiction, either their own or those of family members. And the topic of privilege and diverse representation came up. There are so few writers of color who explore addiction that make it to bestseller lists. All of our writers agree that there's a need to be more present, curious, generous, and open about a subject that still holds so much shame. In the second event, the workshop, we had Hugh Byrne, who is a leader in mindfulness practices to change harmful habits. And he did some teaching and led us in some writing exercises and meditation. You can view these 2 videos from these previous sessions using the link that Misha is pasting in the chat. And now I want to take a pause. I want to ask, if you haven't already, let me know where you're zooming in from. There's a very helpful map. It's called native-land.ca. And you can check that out to learn about locations of Indigenous people in your area. So for example, I'm in Manhattan. It's known as New York, a city located on the unceded land of the Lenape people. For those who wish, you can click on the CC icon to get a live transcript of what's being said, and you can save the chat by clicking on the 3 dots in the chat box. Feel free to send me or Misha a note in the chat privately if you're having any technical issues. We might be able to help you. And I want to make sure everyone knows that you will all get a recording of this event without the breakout sessions as part of a follow-up email that we will be sending out. So the plan is eventually to go into breakout sessions, but first we have special guests, Rabbi Tirzah Firestone and Vimalasara, who will offer some food for thought for us. They will be in conversation for about 35 minutes. And after that, we will go into breakout rooms. That will be for around 15 minutes. And then when you come back, we'll have time for Q&A with Rabbi Tirzah and Vimalasara. So feel free to use the chat if questions are starting to percolate. We will try to collect those for the Q&A session. And now for some quick introductions. Rabbi Tirzah Firestone is an author, Jungian psychotherapist, and spiritual leader in the International Jewish Renewal Movement. And she's a renowned scholar and teacher. She is widely known for her groundbreaking work on Kabbalah, depth psychology, intergenerational trauma healing, and the reintegration of the feminine wisdom tradition within Judaism. Rabbi Tirzah lectures and teaches nationally about spiritual and ancient wisdom practices. Her latest award-winning book is Wounds into Wisdom, Healing Intergenerational Jewish Trauma. She appeared as a guest speaker in Reimagine's series on collective trauma and gun violence last spring. Tirzah, it's great to have you back. She lives in Colorado. And now, Vimalasara. Poet, author, and public speaker Vimalasara is the award-winning author and editor of 10 books. Their writing and editing cross many genres, including poetry, prose, plays, and oral history. They co-wrote the award-winning book, 8-Step Recovery, Using the Buddha's Teachings to Overcome Addiction. They are one of the founding facilitators of Dr. Gabor Mate's Compassionate Inquiry, and have created 10 conversations on the psychedelics as a path to freedom. Their most recent book is I Am Still Your Negro, an homage to James Baldwin. They are a senior teacher in the Triratna Buddhist community and one of the leading African descent voices in the field of mindfulness for addiction. In 2024, a first aid kit for the mind, working with habitual behaviors, will be published, and they live in British Columbia. Rabbi Tirzah, when I connected the two of you, you immediately referred to Vimalasara as a kindred sibling. So here we have a white Jewish daughter of Holocaust survivors and a Black British-born Buddhist together as siblings. And Vimalasara, when our initial conversation touched on the topic of exposing ancestral wounds, I mentioned Tirzah to you, and you were immediately drawn to the idea of her as a dialogue partner. Your spiritual journeys through life are very different, but a little bit the same. You both know what it's like growing up in abusive homes. You both know how easy it is to gravitate towards harmful habits and addiction. And you both know that mindfulness is one way of navigating pain and grief. And what you also have in common, I think, is that you are both polymaths. Art, psychology, theology, pastoral care, I could keep going on. And I'm so grateful that the two of you are here with us this evening. Vimalasara, I'm going to ask you to kick off this conversation.
Okay, thank you. Can we be spotlighted? Is that possible?
Absolutely.
And, oh, great. Okay. Welcome, everybody. And I just really wanted to begin with this question for you, Tirzah, because, you know, with what's happening in the Middle East and you being a rabbi, and also me coming from enslaved stock, a persecuted group of people, I really want to ask you, how is your heart today?
Thank you. Thanks for going right to the heart, Vimalasara. My heart is troubled and very sad. The image that comes is a bird in a cage. I have so many feelings, but it's a landmine out there. It's hard to speak about all the feelings that go on, the hurt and the heartbreak that I feel for everybody on all sides. And thank you for bringing that right in, out of the margins, right onto the coffee table between us. And it's just been dreadful, agonizing time. It's also, there is so much else going on in the world that is also deeply painful. And the chiseling away at our democracy here on this continent, in the United States specifically, the dreadful things that are happening in Eastern Europe and Ukraine, Sudan on the African Peninsula. It's just a mess. And so I'm like all of us. I think we are just trying to hold a steady place, find our center, and relate from the heart to one another. So I'm going to, after that very authentic answer, going to ask you, my sibling, Vimalasara, how is your heart?
It's very tender, and just thank you for naming some of the other conflicts in the world. I was completely shocked to just see that there are 32 kind of conflicts, wars in the world, and over 20 of them are on the continent of Africa. And just, yeah. And it's tender because, of course, like, what can I do out there in those places? But there's something I can do here where I live, and it's tender because I just know with the anti-Semitism and the Islamophobia which is arising, you know, in the West, that means that it will have an impact on addictive and compulsive behaviors.
That's right.
And so, you know, for me, it's tender, it's confusing, there's some frustration, and my heart, I want to say that my heart is just really, it's wide open. My heart is wide open, and really wanting to practice not polarizing. Yeah. To just see people as just human beings, and just see the suffering in any human being. Yeah. Yeah.
In all of us, this immense vulnerability. And I think that in all the mystical traditions, I know that this is certainly in depth psychology, as it is in Jewish mysticism, and perhaps also in Buddhism. There is an idea of the collective unconscious, the collective soul, not the rock band, but the shared soul. And that slices deeply into my territory when we talk about cellular memory. You know, we're so connected to one another. We could be thousands of miles away, and yet we feel for each other, and we may be thousands of years away from our ancestors, but we feel their cellular memory. We feel their what they went through, the events that they lived through in us. And in some cases, in many cases, we're still reacting to their unmetabolized traumas in 2023. And what we see on the world stage is so often that intergenerational legacy. There's all kinds of intergenerational legacies. There's a lot of wisdom that's come down to us, and a lot of resilience.
Course. There is a lot.
Their resilience, right?
Sure.
But also
there is a lot of wisdom that is downloaded to us. And in a way, it's interesting. We talk so much about intergenerational trauma, and part of that intergenerational trauma is intergenerational hatred.
Yes.
And just how addictive that hatred can be, and how we pass it down to, you know, to the next generation, and so that they hate the same group of people. Yes. And it just doesn't seem to, we think we've got over it, and then something happens, and there's just this hatred arises. And it you know, and again, as we see, you know, when we're talking about addictive and compulsive behaviors, war is a matter of life and death. Hatred is a matter of life and death. And it's the one addiction that we just don't talk about. And yet it takes so many unnecessary lives.
Yes, I love where you're going. I'm going to just define that any really this compulsive reactivity to pull the trigger, whether it's anger or it's a desperate need to use, to eat, to shop, to name any any verb there, to use my screen, to etc. But also to make war, because that is in me. It is this archaic seed that is in my epigenetics. It's unfinished business of my ancestors, and we have seen that flare to life on the world stage once again, and it's dismal. It could be, yes, it could lead to hopelessness, haven't we? With all of our spiritual traditions and all of our religiosity and all of our philosophies, and have we not made any progress? These things just happen. So that's to me, that's an addiction, is the being consumed and not having autonomy to
we
act
could look at
choice.
we could look at the C's of addiction, isn't it? The loss of control. Yeah. Still using despite the consequences, the compulsion to use. Yeah.
And you being, let me just call Dr. Mate into the room here, because you're a student of his. I consider him a sibling and my teacher. He has done such amazing research on addiction as being rooted in, as you well know, rooted in trauma, rooted if you follow the thread of someone's addiction and go back and back and back, you find that it is there is some nexus point, some critical moment where they dissociated. They had to
thank you for calling Gaborin, who is a friend and a teacher. And one of the things he talks about is that there was nobody to talk to. And in a way, we're looking at the voiceless one, and we can see that, whether it's people using substances, or whether it's processed behaviors, or whether it's war or whatever, that actually this, when people are voiceless, they're not able to verbalize, or they don't feel heard. They don't think that they're being heard. And it's almost as if it's as if the behavior is soothing. Again, I just think I can understand how substances are really soothing for people, but yet I have to also see that actually war is soothing for people.
Yes.
Right now, it's soothing. It's like actually we're having justice here, and it's soothing.
Yeah.
And again, this is why people turn to these behaviors, because they feel so awful that the whole system is discombobulated. And how can we soothe the nervous system? And it's those behaviors, those are, so again, if we look at process addictions, we would see war would be one of those things in there, that behavior to regulate.
Goes directly to, one of the hallmarks of trauma, whether it's individual trauma or collective trauma, is the strange predilection, this tendency to unconsciously reenact our injury on ourselves or on another. So that's why we find young people who are traumatized out of their minds on the battlefield, but they come back and their nervous system is so ratcheted up. The only way they can find relief is to sign up for another tour of duty, because there's a match. There's a nervous system match there, and why. So there is this compulsivity that happens with war, but it happens with any kind of abuse or any kind of injury.
Well, let's look at the pandemic, which the majority of the world went through, and it's said that the alcohol consumption went through the roof during the pandemic,
Yeah.
completely through the roof. And then thinking about the consumption of the news, how people got so addicted to watching the news and what was happening, which got them even to more of a state around it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alcohol consumption, also domestic violence went up. Of course, people were
Yes.
sequestered in their homes.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
maybe it's time to turn the knob a little bit and talk about things that have worked in your life, things that have worked for me, actionable steps, as Andy likes to put it.
Steps.
What are the what have we learned, you and I, as
It's a good question, and I put my head down because that moment of pause. I want to start from the place of whenever I think about picking back up, I don't want to be in that hell realm. It was a complete hell realm for me. Yeah. And I would say what I've learned is letting go of my choices of substances, of behaviors, has given me freedom. Yeah. And I want more freedom. It's liberating. It's freedom to be enslaved by a substance or by a behavior. It's just trapped. We're just like this rat, those hamsters which would go round and round and round and round on the wheel, going round and round, fall off and go round and round and round and fall off. We're like that hamster just caught on this vicious cycle. So for me, what I've learned is that the same old crap happens in your life. As we say, before enlightenment is chopping the wood and hauling the water, and after enlightenment is chopping the wood and hauling the water. And guess what? After you've let go of your behaviors, you're still chopping the wood and hauling the water, but it's so much easier to chop the wood and haul the water. What have you learned?
It's beautiful. I learned something from one of the terror victims, someone who lost their daughter to a suicide bomber, a person who did a lot of research with people from around the world. And he said something so brilliant, Rami El-Hanan. He said, yeah, he's an Israeli. And he said, we have to learn how to harness the power of our pain, that our pain, because he became like a crazy animal after he lost his daughter. And admittedly, he was a terror. He wanted to just kill. He wanted to take vengeance. He wanted to just, they had to hold him back for a long time. I write about his story, how the key turned for him. But he says it's like pain is like a nuclear energy. You can use it, you can harness it, you can let it be fuel. When pain made conscious can turn into fuel. And nuclear energy, like pain, can be destructive and blow everyone up around you, or it can be channeled for light and for warmth. And I feel like all of us, we're all addicts at some level or another.
I love this. I love this story because in a way we can ask what worked for us, but what works for the people who perhaps have a partner or have a child. They may not, be on that spectrum of having addictive and compulsive behaviors. And what it brought to mind is I can remember there was this famous murder and the woman was in the court and she wanted to kill this person. And then she realized in that moment, I'm just like him. I'm just like him. So in a way, those of you who perhaps, who've got partners or relatives in your family, one thing can help is we're not separate. We are not separate. And when we become separate, we think we're separate and we're different. It's that really keeps us apart. As you say, we've all got addictive behaviors. It's just on a spectrum. And on one end, it really is a matter of life and death. On another end, we function and we go along with life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And segueing off of what you just said, Vimalasara, we're all on this, we're all compulsive, we're all crazed right now. The world is kind of crazy. We share the culture, we share this field, we're all in the marinade together of a kind of ratcheted up world. And it's really important that we know we're not alone. And that's why I want to thank Andy and all of the Reimagine folks. We need community. It doesn't matter if it's on a Zoom call, a bunch of a circle of squares. We need each other. We need to know that we're not alone. We're not isolated, because that's another thing that trauma does. It tends to feel shameful. It tends to feel isolating, like we're alone in this, that we're weird, that we're shameful human beings. And the truth is, we're all sharing those same feelings, and in our own caves. So coming out and having this discussion is so good and so healthy.
One of the things that you reminded me of, and what really helped me, and what was a real turning point, because as you mentioned, shame, if we have shame, we think something desperately wrong with us. And I know that I thought there was something desperately wrong with me because I was suffering. I couldn't get it together. And when I read the first noble truth in Buddhism, that this human life will bring suffering, it was like, oh my God, I'm normal, I'm human. You know, it was like, really, it was like, not just I'm not the only one, but it's like, this is normal, this is part of life, get over it. Yeah. And that was just such a turning point. And again, isn't it, I think Oprah Winfrey co-wrote a book which says what happened to you, because it's not so much what's wrong with you, but actually what happened to us, which brings us into that intergenerational trauma, you know, trauma that happened in our lineage of families before we were even thought of, before we were even imagined.
Right. Yeah. Beautifully said. And maybe the other half of that, the other side of that coin of feeling shameful, is also pointing the finger at other people. And I think that's happening en masse right now, certainly in my country, in the US, where there's a lot of blame, there's a lot of fear. So there's a lot of blame, and and when we start to blame, it's so easy to, it's like a slide, it's like we slide into these places where we castigate others, we shame others, or we feel that they're no longer human. I know that's unfortunately happening in the Middle East right now. We dehumanize the enemy instead of remembering, whoa, no, that's inside me. That's inside me. So that tendency to get afraid, to blame, and then to other the other people that we don't know so easy. And then it's a very slippery slide into getting into crazy places where we can, God forbid, become violent and go to war again, because it's easy. It's so easy to step on a bug. I hate that. Even that much is hard for me.
Yeah, I mean, often, again, people ask what can we do? And again, what we can do is, I actually ministered a memorial at the weekend, and it was somebody who had died of alcoholism and had left 3 children, and it was a very complicated, people with a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, frustration, etc. One of the things I said in the surface is that it's an opportunity for the whole community to come into recovery. It isn't about one person, that we as a whole community have to come into recovery. Sometimes just, bringing it back to, somebody perhaps who has a partner who uses, and what can they do? And I'll ask them, well, do you drink? And they'll say, oh, I'm not an alcoholic. And I'll say, no, I'm not asking you if you're an alcoholic, just do you drink? No, I'm not an alcoholic. And I just say, no, I'm not asking if you're alcoholic, do you drink? And they'll say, yes. And then the first thing I say is, well, the first thing you can do is you could stop drinking with your partner. But I'm not an alcoholic. Why would I need to stop? And I say, well, if you're finding it so difficult to stop, how would you expect the person who you're concerned about to stop? And actually, really, if we want change, we have to be the change. We have to model the behavior. And there is something that we can do as an individual, because when we do something as an individual, it impacts our community.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Mm.
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 Can I ask a question for the two of you? I'm curious, the time in your life that you can think back on when you discovered mindfulness as a way to help you both out of dark places.
Mm.
Sure, I can go first. Thank you for that question. I often say that mindfulness is my Prozac, and I say I'm a poster child of mindfulness. What I do want to say is, for me, mindfulness came into my life in my 20s, and I'm now 61, just turned 61. So it's been a long time. And I would say that actually the reason why I got into mindfulness was because it was the cheapest drug ever at that time. It was like I could get high. I was one of the I was going to go on retreat. I remember during the millennium, and all my mates were going to go on all these parties. I said, forget it, I'm going on retreat for 3 weeks, because I had such altered states, such blissful states, and I wanted more. And in a way, what I would say, just it was the first time that I was able to experience happiness, which didn't involve substances or behaviors. And I knew that it was something that had come into my life that was going to have a huge impact. So mindfulness is transformative. And I want to say that actually, because it came into my life so young, I think it's a reason why that I don't have to take medication. Okay, because it came into my life at an early age, and it doesn't work for everybody. But let's hear from Tirzah.
So good. I'm going to confess here that I do rabbinic retreats, mindfulness retreats, silent retreats, but my way, my way is prayer. And that's my kind of mindfulness. It's like logging on to, so to speak, logging on to some bigger consciousness that is so much wiser than me. The sometimes it's my ancestors, sometimes it's God, sometimes it's Shekhinah, the divine feminine. It takes different times in my life. It's been different things, but logging on to a big view, more of a cosmic consciousness, so I can get out of my small little, that little treadmill that Vimalasara was talking about, just going round and round. And we have a saying or a term in Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, Mochin de Gadlut, which I think is also in Buddhism. It's big mind, right? It's like I have my small mouse mind, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, just logging on. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for letting me pray, for having the ability to pray. And I know many people don't have that theology, or it doesn't work for them, or it doesn't don't believe in God and as an other out there. And I don't actually either, but because I was born into a family that prayed and prayed earnestly and heartfully, it has always been my default. And when I get into, the crazy mind spinning places, I will just say, oh God, help. I know that I'm just like I've worked myself into a corner. Help me out. And as soon as I ask for help, it breaks the walls open. So I believe in prayer, and I just want to maybe just say that. And it doesn't have to be Jewish prayer or Christian prayer. Maybe it's just SOS. Is there anyone out there? Please help. Just the word, oh, help me, just those words. And so that's my And then everything shifts. It's like my brain shifts,
Mm.
my neurological approach shifts. I all of a sudden
Mm.
I have a different take. I can laugh at myself. I can feel
Mm.
kindness toward myself because I know that someone out there, whether it's the ancestors or it's the divine feminine, someone is smiling kindly at me and saying, "You're working too hard, honey." It's like, just relax, just relax. You're okay. We gotcha.
I love your practice of mindfulness, and it resonates. I think definitely for me at the beginning, it was really cultivating loving kindness towards myself and learning to love myself because I didn't love myself. But, today it's become so much bigger. And, you talk about ancestors and, quite honestly, Tirzah, you and I, we are our ancestors' wildest dream. And I know that this might seem like a cliche, but actually, for your ancestors for you to be here, for your ancestors to imagine that
Yeah,
you could be what you're doing right now, and for my ancestors to imagine what I'm able to do right now. And not just because of our
yeah,
cultural or racial lineage, but even being in a female body and
that
being able to
too.
do what
You
we can
know,
do right now.
I want to weep when you say that because oftentimes, and I'm sure you have your corollary, Vimalasara, of the ancestors who went through hell,
Mm,
just
mm,
such torture. And,
mm,
sometimes I think, I had ancestors in the gas chambers and if I imagine into that space often, even though,
mm,
god awful place to imagine into, but, and, of course, their last prayer on their lips would probably be, let me have, let,
mm,
let there be people coming out of me who have freedom,
mm,
who have freedom of religion, who have
mm,
freedom to believe, who have freedom to move in the world, who aren't discriminated against. Let me have
mm,
conscious and descendants,
mm,
uh, 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 progeny, offspring that can, and that just, whenever I think about that, I just want to just bow down and cry because
mm.
they would be so proud. We are their dreams. We are their prayers.
Yeah, I can remember watching both Harriet and 12 Years a Slave, and my whole body went into a shiver. I mean, that DNA recognition, it was just this, what was going on, this complete shiver, and just knowing, I mean, just the fact. I mean, there still isn't 100% freedom, but it's very different today from what it was 50 years ago. Yeah, which is again, we are our ancestors' wildest dream, and how we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. Our ancestors are supporting us, and how can we make the most of this? Yeah, how can we make the most of that potential of freedom? And I suppose in a way that question is, how do we begin to heal that ancestral trauma? Yeah,
Right.
how do we begin to heal it? Yeah.
One
Mm.
thing I'm sure of right now is the bombs are flying around the world and horrors are taking place, that we have such a privilege in this. Yes, life is hard, but probably every one of us who are listening in on this conversation and will be sharing in the breakout rooms, every one of us is so privileged to have a modicum of safety, just the safety. The bombs aren't flying, that we have a roof over our head, I hope, for everyone that's listening.
Mm.
And how do we use that? How do we use that to make our ancestors proud? How do we use that to help other people? How do we use that to give back to those who don't have that, who just were born into families that the kids don't have safety. They're living in shell shock. So
As you say that, I was with one of my clients in the Middle East, and I realized, oh, my privilege, I have options, I have choices. That's what privilege is. It's like options and choices.
that's right.
And how can we begin to make the most of those options and those choices? And I think again, it's that we do have to do that work. I think I saw in the chat about shamanism journey, and I'm all into shamanism journeying. And yes, there is the healing that we do have to do. if we are going to have freedom, we do have to turn towards the pain and the suffering. We do, there's a wonderful Dogen quote. Dogen was a 9th century, 8th century Buddhist teacher, practitioner. And he said to study the Buddha way is to study the self. And to study the self is to let go of the self. And when we let go of the self, we're illuminated by a myriad of things. But I think that rule, it reminds me of a Pat Parker quote. First, you remember I'm Black, and then second, you forget I'm Black. You know, so this thing of actually, we do need to know who we are.
That's right.
You know, we do need to know, and to know part of that history. Also, the history in the womb, you know, where were your parents when you were in the womb? What were your parents going through? Because again, people can come out so regulated out of the womb that is the hotbed of addictive and compulsive behaviors as that child grows. Yeah. So it's so important to do that work if we're able to, because of course for some people they're not able to find out the history.
I just want to take a pause.
Go ahead, Andy.
This conversation, which is going beautifully. We wanted some food for thought to prepare everyone for these breakout sessions, and we got a feast of thought already. I just want to, if Misha, if you wouldn't mind putting the spotlight off, I just wanted to prepare everyone for these breakout sessions. We will come back in about 15 minutes, and then we're going to take your questions for Vimalasara and Tirzah. But I want everyone to please be mindful of the time. Make sure that everyone has had a chance to share within these 15 minutes. We'll be pasting instructions in the chat for those who may need some help while in the breakout rooms. There is a function to ask for help. We can go in there and we can take you out if you don't want to be in the breakout room, but of course we encourage everyone to join. Yeah, you may want to copy these instructions just to have them. Let me get this ready for you all. I'm going to now share also the prompts that we want to give you for this discussion that you're going to have with your peers. The first one is, what insights have you gained about yourself through your struggles with harmful habits or addictions? And can you name at least one new opportunity or see one new pathway that may have cleared? The second prompt is there a small, sweet step that you can take for yourself or an act of service to benefit others that might lead to a pathway towards change or recovery? We'll broadcast those also while you're in the rooms. I am going to get things going with the breakout sessions. Thank you, Misha, for pasting those. Patience, here we go. Okay, so we're aiming for about 4 people per group. Okay, and I'm going to move folks around if needed. Okay, I'm going to open all the rooms and we'll see you in about 15 minutes, okay? Vimalasara and Tirzah, I'm so glad you opted to join these groups. And now I'm just curious, to hear from all of you if you have any questions for our beautiful, esteemed speakers here. Now is the time. And Vimalasara and Tirzah, if you have any reflections, about some of what you experienced in the group, sharing anonymously, of course, but if there's anything that you want to reflect on that made you think a bit, please share that.
Somebody in my group said something very beautiful at the end. They said something like, acknowledging it's not my fault, but I have a responsibility to heal the intergenerational trauma, the family trauma. And I think that's really beautiful. that, yeah, that it's not our fault, and we do have some responsibility to heal it, because we're leaving a legacy for the next generation that comes. So, and again, that responsibility of letting go of the addictive compulsive behaviors so that it's easier for the next generation who comes along. So it was very beautiful. So thank you. You know who it was. I won't say who it was, but you know who it was. It was very beautiful. Thank you.
I see a question from Susan. Susan, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
First of all, I wanted to thank the questions were fantastic. And I realized that last question, I put together something I never would have put together previously, had that question not be asked about channeling our past behaviors into something new. So it was like a light bulb moment for me. So I really appreciate that. My question is for Tirzah. I think you mentioned you were a child of Holocaust survivors, as am I. So what resonated with me was when you were saying, for the last moments, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this now, of people in the gas chambers clawing their way, saying, we are their dreams, we are their prayers. I felt that way for a period of time, especially with my dad, who died on December 31st of 2021. And this was the first year that I could say I am relieved that he is not here to witness what has been going on. And I don't know if this is I mean, it's been tragic, again, on all sides for what's been happening in the Middle East. I wonder if it's a particular trigger for second generation, as I call it, because he just always promised me this wouldn't happen again. This wouldn't happen again. And I remember even on 9/11, calling him saying, but you told me this was going to happen again. He's my daddy. I believed him. I believed, his words. People suffered enough. So I have a hard time taking any solace. I do want to move past it, but I just have a hard time, accepting their dreams died, their prayers died with us that day. And I just, I'm stuck in that place right now. That's where I'm stuck.
Yeah, I really hear you. Thank you so much for your comment. And I just lost the last person in my family on my mother's side who was 102. He was a Holocaust survivor, escaped Austria when the Anschluss came in at 16, and had an unbelievable Mexico, Cuba, finally to the United States, and then went right back in to serve and to fight at Normandy. And I know that the news, Susan, I just think it just crushed him. He was very, very alive and very sharper than me at the end of his life. And it crushed him to see that, October 7th and then this war just, he told me at the end, I don't think I want to watch the news anymore. And he was really someone who always warned us about fascism rising in the US. We have to be so careful with these people. Because he understood the geopolitics in a way that, probably like your father did, understood the depths of what it means. So I think first generation survivors, second generation, even third generation survivors, we have that epigenetic imprint within us, that we have what Vimalasara called it, is like the cellular reverberation. It is in us, and I think we have to turn to face it and to see it. I'm going to use a big word, there is evil in the world, and when we must not turn away from it. We have to face it and to confront it in ourselves and on the world stage and in each other, and stand up against it, and world history goes in these immense cycles. So we're feeling some of and it's not 1930s by any means at all right now, but there are some things that are coming back around. and recycling. And we have this in us. And so we're vibrating with it. Yeah. So much more to say, but Wounds into Wisdom, my book talks all about this.
I see a question from Gurlane. Please unmute.
Unmute.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have two questions, and I guess the first one was an activation from the word evil, which is not one that I tend to use consciously in my vocabulary because it's activating and it feels contradictory to this cultivation and fostering of compassion and actions taken from places of trauma. So I just want to put that out there if there's anything that you'd like to share. And then also for both our wonderful panelists and speakers, where are you sourcing hope? Do you see a time when we do not turn to reactivity and war? Or is that just Pollyannish to hope and think for? So just anything that you can offer would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Ghislaine, actually, if we could still have Ghislaine here, because I had a question I want to ask Ghislaine. What's the story of evil for you? That word, evil.
Thank you for it may have to do with my Catholic background.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that just this part of me that just doesn't believe in evil. Just more actions taken from a place of hurt. I can't allow myself to go to that place of evil because then it's a quick spiraling into othering and dehumanizing. Because I've seen it, we've read about it over and over and over again. So that's where the activation comes from me. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, as I was listening to that, I was thinking what the media does. The media actually presents certain groups of people as evil, don't they? Yeah. And yeah, so thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And, you know, in a way, I suppose that segues in for that question of hope and possibility, I think, right? I think that hope, this is something that actually Gabor actually taught me in a way, is hope. I can remember hope. I would pray to God, please take me away. And I would be so passive and not do anything and hope something would happen, you know. And in a way, I think there is possibility that in each individual, there is possibility. And something that you say that actually, you know, people do these things, you know, if we look at all these wars, if we look at this most recent one that's escalated, you know, it's like, well, one group of people comes in and, you know, slaughters, you know, 1,200 people, and people are hurt and they want revenge. That's what they think. That's the only way. They think, you know, hatred meets hatred. And I will use hatred because I do think it's a poison. In fact, actually, what I will use is militarism. I'll go to Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King named the 3 poisons of the world, and one of them was militarism. Militarism, poverty, and racism. Yeah. And you can see that. And actually, it's like when people experience being under threat, they go into fight, you know, and in a way there is possibility, you know. I think in a way, the reason why negotiators are trying to get a ceasefire, trying to have a pause, because we know that actually when there's a pause, there's some possibility something can happen. Yes. But when people are, you know, at each other, there's no possibility there. So I do think for me, I get my hope because there are lots of beautiful and kind things that happen in the world. Yeah, and we can tend to forget that. So that's where I get I believe in the potential of the human being. A human being can be capable of such atrocities, but at the same time, the human being can be capable of such creativity. And I hold on to that possibility. Over to you,
I
Tirzah.
love that. Thank you. And thank you. I love that you push back at that word because it is so easy to be misused, and it's so easy to use it in the service of othering and making and dehumanizing. And I mean it more in an archetypal sense, that we can, we have a choice. We have a choice of what we do here, and logging on to that possibility, logging on to how can I help? How can I serve? How can I uplift while I'm here in this life, in this body? Um, and there are powerful forces, archetypal forces that that keep us in this kind of that compulsive madness. You did this to me, I'll do it to you, and that sort of cyclical downward spiral. So hope, I just have to say, I feel very hopeful tonight at this talk. This is extremely beautiful to me, and it gives me a lot of hope. I've been hearing from people from all over the country, and I know that there are people from outside of the country. Well, Vimalasara is from Canada, and earlier than that from England. So it feels like a global effort right now to heal our ancestors, our ancestral baggage, to look at ourselves, to get mindful, to clean up our act, to pass on to the next generation goodness and hopefulness and a clean earth. So that's all. That makes me happy and hopeful.
Thank you for that, Gurlane. I'm going to remove the spotlight here and just go to the question here, actually, which the question that Jenlyn asked: what can I realistically do when confronted with evil? That word has come, so we're going to debunk the word, but it's there. And what I would say is what we can realistically do is not to have hatred. That's what we can realistically do. In fact, I remember a friend saying, forgiveness can be so hard, but yet an aspect of forgiveness, sometimes people say, I can't forgive, but I don't have hatred, and that is a form of forgiveness. So in a way, it's so easy when we are confronted by things that really hurt us for us to go into aversion. And again, it's not to think of people as evil or evil acts everywhere, because what we think will influence, we will create that world. Yeah, we will create that world. And again, I do think there is possibility, the fact that there were, that I'm so glad it was Qatar and not the US who did the negotiating, but yet there have been people behind the scenes desperately to do the negotiating. I have a friend at the moment who's in Jordan, really teaching people about the disinformation about the war at the moment. There are people out there doing things to really help and support people. So again, to really, for us to, when we think the world is a bad place, it's going to become a bad place, and that's all we're going to see. And I know it's hard because, I can, in a way, sometimes I do have that dark night. During the George Floyd time, during the George Floyd moment, I had a dark night moment, and I had to pull myself up, and not think every policeman is bad, every blah blah blah, because I would have created that in my world. And we have to look beyond, look, when we're confronted by hurt or hatred, not to look into it, but to look beyond it and know that that person is suffering. Yeah. And it's hard.
Tirzah, thank you so much. I just want to echo what I'm reading in the chat here from Debbie. I am feeling better at the end of this meeting than I did at the start, and therefore I can do more good work in this world than when I was only feeling wounded. That really echoes for me as well. I hope for all of you. Vimalasara and Tirzah, you've given us a lot of hope. And
Thank you,
a
Andy.
pause. You know, we talked about the pause and the ceasefire. I feel like I got a pause tonight from the two of you, and I really appreciate it. We all appreciate you. I hope you can join us for more Reimagine events, all of you going forward. We have our vigil on December 6th. We talked about before the benefits of mindfulness, of prayer. We have a secular vigil the first Wednesday of every month. I hope you'll join us. And you'll all get a recording of this. Hope to see you all soon.
Thank you all
Good
so
night,
much.
everyone.
Vimalasara.
Thank you.
What a
Yeah.
privilege.
Yeah, what a privilege. How is your heart now as we part? How is your heart?
Very full of love. How about you?
Full of love for you and for all beings here on this call. Yeah, full of love. Thank you.
Andy. Thank you,
Yeah.
Vision.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you.